Welcome to the annual Non-Discrimination, Harassment, and Sexual Misconduct Education, Awareness, and Prevention Training for Employees. This training was developed by the NIU Affirmative Action Equal Opportunity in Education Office within Academic Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, along with campus and community partners. The state of Illinois requires all employees receive annual training. Even if you took this training a year ago, you must take it again. Let's get started. These are the topics we will focus on today: discrimination, harassment, sexual misconduct, Title IX, reporting, and becoming an active bystander. These are sensitive topics and subject matter that sometimes can cause a trigger reaction. A trigger reaction is a negative reaction to topics due to a negative experience, either for you, your family, or someone you know. If you feel you are going to have a negative reaction, stop the training immediately and contact ADEI-training at niu.edu for next steps. Do not underestimate your reaction to these topics. Even if you are able to view part of this module, do not view any area that may trigger a negative reaction. Contact ADEI-training at niu.edu for next steps. As a part of this training, you must review the legal definitions and processes handout provided in the left toolbar. At the end of the training, you must certify that you reviewed this handout. Let's get started. You will notice throughout this training there are short quizzes. You may want to have a writing utensil to jot down your answers.
We're going to start out with a short true or false quiz to see what you know. Please respond to these 5 statements with either true or false. These are questions we will answer throughout the training. Number 1. At least one characteristic I have puts me into a protected category. Number 2. Being stalked can be very scary, but it is not a form of sexual misconduct. Number 3. As an employee, if a student reports they have been a victim of sexual misconduct, I have to make a report. Number 4. The state of Illinois and NIU policy prohibit discrimination. Number 5. Sexual harassment doesn't happen through technology. Remember, you will learn more about all these topics in this training. Now let's see how you did. Let's review. Number 1. At least one characteristic I have puts me into a protected category. The correct answer is true. Number 2. Being stalked can be very scary, but it is not a form of sexual misconduct. The correct answer is false. Number 3. As an employee, if a student tells me they have been a victim of a sexual misconduct, I have to make a report. The correct answer is true. Number 4. The state of Illinois and NIU policy prohibit discrimination. The correct answer is true. Number 5. Sexual harassment doesn't happen through technology. The correct answer is false. Don't worry if you didn't get them all correct. We will discuss these questions and more in the training. Now let's move on to policies.
NIU, amongst other employers, have policies for employees to follow when it comes to discrimination, harassment, retaliation, and sexual misconduct. These 2 policies are listed on the slide and can be found in the policy library. They can also be found easily by typing non-discrimination policy or sexual misconduct policy into the NIU website search bar. There are many items the policy covers, including equal employment opportunity, which means NIU does not unlawfully discriminate on the basis of any protected category when it comes to making employment and hiring decisions. It also covers academic decisions such as admission into the university or participation in educational programs or activities. We encourage anyone who has experienced unlawful discrimination to report it to the Ethics and Compliance Office. They have trained investigators who will respond to the allegations. As always, when there is a violation of policy, corrective action will take place. The action depends on the circumstances and the situation. Every situation will be different, even though they may seem the same. This training will explain these policies, what is considered a violation of these policies, and resources available for reporting and responding. Let's talk about unlawful discrimination. Harassment is unwelcome conduct based on an actual or perceived protected category. Please review the Human Rights Act definition of harassment by referring to the legal definitions and processes handout provided to you at the start of the training. The behavior typically has to be severe and pervasive depending upon the established standards for each protected class. For example, harassment may be repeated actions or comments that substantially interfere with an individual's work. These acts can be physical or verbal. These repeated or severe actions create an intimidating, hostile, or offensive workplace or educational environment. Let's look at this example. Employee A calls Employee B derogatory names because of their gender-related appearance. Employee B rarely misses work, but lately has started missing days. They try to avoid Employee A, and they have begun having panic attacks due to Employee A's treatment. Other examples can include, but are not limited to, racial, ethnic, or gender slurs, offensive jokes, insults, or put-downs. These actions can make it difficult for a reasonable person to complete their work or focus on their education. We will discuss details for reporting these actions later in the training. Unlawful discrimination happens when someone is being treated unfavorably or being subjected to adverse treatment, and that treatment is based on their protected category. This can happen to employees, students, and even visitors who come to our campus. Please review the Human Rights Act definition of unlawful discrimination by referring to the legal definitions and processes handout in the left toolbar, as well as the link in the training announcement. When unlawful discrimination is reported, there are two factors the university takes into consideration. 1. The person has had to have been treated unfavorably or subjected to adverse treatment. Adverse treatment can be something clear, such as being terminated or denied promotion. Adverse treatment also includes being ridiculed, threatened, or subjected to verbal or physical behavior. 2. The treatment has to be based on the protected category of the recipient of the treatment, whether that is the employee, student, or visitor. These protected categories are established by university policy, which includes all of the protected categories that are recognized by the state and federal law. What are these protected categories, and what do they have to do with us?
The list on the slide shows state and federal protected categories, as well as some additionally protected categories referenced within the NIU non-discrimination, harassment, and retaliation policy. Everyone will find themselves somewhere in this list, usually multiple times. Some of the categories might be very interesting to you, such as order of protection status or arrest record. Because we all find ourselves in these categories, it lets us know that protected categories are not just for one group or set of people. We are all afforded some protection under the law, as well as NIU policy. That's important to know because 1, so we don't violate the policies, 2, so we know we are protected and have options if we are violated in some way, and 3, so we know what to report when we see others who have either violated the policy or are being violated. An individual cannot be discriminated against or harassed because of a characteristic that is protected by the university's non-discrimination, harassment, and retaliation policy. Please review the definitions for each protected category based on Illinois law. They can be found on the legal definitions and processes handout that is provided in the left toolbar in this training. On this same handout, you will also find definitions associated with violations of an individual's civil rights under the Illinois Human Rights Act. For example, a person cannot be prohibited from speaking their native language at work in conversations unrelated to their work duties. Let's take time to consider this slide. What protected categories do you find yourself in?
Title IX states, "No person in the United States shall, on the basis of sex, be excluded from participation in, be denied the benefits of, or be subjected to discrimination under any educational program or activity receiving federal financial assistance." The State Officials and Employees Ethics Act also prohibits sexual harassment from occurring in the workplace. Title IX is most often associated with sports equality for women. However, sex discrimination also includes sexual misconduct and is prohibited by NIU in accordance with Title IX. Northern Illinois University does not tolerate sex discrimination in any form. The Title IX Sexual Misconduct Policy and Complaint Procedures for Employees and Students Policy can be found at go.niu.edu/Title IX Policy and in the left toolbar on this presentation. There are 7 types of sexual misconduct, including sexual harassment, gender-sex discrimination, sexual abuse, sexual assault, intimate partner violence, sexual exploitation, and stalking. Each of these is a serious violation of NIU policy. Let's briefly discuss each so you have a better understanding. The Ethics Act definition of sexual harassment, which is also consistent with NIU's policy on sexual harassment, as any unwelcome sexual advances, requests for sexual favors, or any conduct of a sexual nature when 1. Submission to such conduct is made either explicitly or implicitly a term or condition of an individual's employment. 2. Submission to or rejection of such conduct by an individual is used as the basis for employment decisions affecting such individual. Or 3. Such conduct has the purpose or effect of substantially interfering with an individual's work performance or creating an intimidating, hostile, or offensive working environment. Now let's move on to types of sexual harassment.
Sexual harassment is conduct that is unwelcome, sexual in nature, and severe or pervasive enough to interfere with the student or employee's educational or work performance or creates a hostile, intimidating, or objectively offensive educational or work environment. The effect of the action as perceived by the victim, not the intent of the alleged offender, is used to determine whether sexual harassment has occurred. There are two types of sexual harassment. One is quid pro quo, which means this for that. For example, when a manager or supervisor communicates to their employee that in order for them to receive a promotion, raise, or other job benefit, they must participate in something sexual in return. 2 is hostile work academic environment, which means the frequency, severity, and behavior of the sexual harassment interferes with a person's ability to do their job, meet academic requirements, or affects their psychological well-being. Remember, it is the effect of the action as perceived by the victim, not the intent of the alleged offender, that is used to determine whether the sexual harassment has occurred. Some examples would be deliberate touching or cornering, pressure for dates, sexual teasing, jokes, questions, neck or shoulder massages. Sexual harassment could be visual, for example, showing someone a sexually explicit picture from a phone or in person when they do not want to see it or have not asked to see it. Verbal, such as making sexually derogatory comments, or physical in nature, for instance, touching someone in a sexual manner without their consent. Sexual harassment can also take place via technology. Let's learn more. When someone shares an unwanted image of a sexual nature through electronic means, this can be considered sexual harassment. Sexual exploitation is not limited to in-person interactions. It can occur through electronic communications as well. Consider how often technology is used to communicate with others. This includes texting, email, social media, photos, and videos. Protect your digital footprint by not sending or sharing images, videos, or communication of a sexual nature through social media posts or comments, text messages, discussion board comments, and emails. Communication via technology that is unwanted and sexual in nature is still sexual harassment and prohibited by NIU policy and should be reported. If an employee receives unwanted communications of a sexual nature, report this to the Title IX coordinator. We will discuss more about the Title IX coordinator later in this presentation. Let's take a moment to determine what we have learned. Read the next slide and determine what is happening.
Employee A recently married their longtime partner. After returning from the honeymoon, two coworkers began making sexual comments on a daily basis. The comments have now become more graphic, and one coworker even sent a sexually explicit picture. Employee A has started to avoid the coworkers, but they make it a point to walk past Employee A's desk and continue to make comments. Employee A has become so upset that they have begun calling in sick and even missed a big deadline because the comments and pictures are so upsetting. What is happening? This is an example of hostile work environment sexual harassment due to the coworker's unwelcome conduct of a sexual nature that is interfering with Employee A's work performance and creating a hostile or offensive workplace. Now let's move on to the next slide. Gender discrimination is being treated unfavorably or being subjected to an adverse treatment because of one's gender, gender identity, or gender expression. Sex discrimination is being treated unfavorably or being subject to an adverse treatment because of one's sex or sexual orientation. Gender and sex discrimination is a policy violation. Examples may include paying someone a different salary due to their gender or sexual orientation, even though their job and performance is the same, or not hiring someone due to their sexual orientation or gender identity. Choosing interns of a particular gender, gender identity, or sexual orientation, or selecting individuals for a particular outing or trip based on their gender identity can all be considered gender-sex discrimination. Pregnancy is also covered under this form of discrimination. If a pregnant student misses an exam due to an emergency that is related to the pregnancy, that student must be given the opportunity to make up the exam with documentation of the emergency appointment. Sexual assault and abuse are also policy violations. Sexual assault and abuse is sexual penetration or contact that occurs when 1. Consent is not provided, which means the sexual act was not a clear, unambiguous, informed, voluntary, and mutual agreement. 2. An individual is incapable of providing consent. This occurs when an individual is incapacitated due to drugs or alcohol, has a physical or mental impairment, is under the age of consent, or is asleep or unconscious. 3. Force, threat of force, intimidation, or coercion was present. Consent will be discussed further later in this module. Acts of unwanted, touching an individual's body, such as their breasts, buttocks, or genitals, is an act of sexual abuse, and engaging in unwanted sexual intercourse or penetration is considered forms of sexual assault. Both of these acts are very serious violations of university policy. These acts can happen to anyone, including students, faculty, and staff, regardless of their age, gender, race, gender identity, gender expression, or sexual orientation. Sexual assault and/or abuse should be reported. Stalking is engaging in a course of conduct directed at a specific person that would cause a reasonable person to fear for their safety or the safety of others, or suffer substantial emotional distress. Stalking can include, but is not limited to, repeatedly asking for a date, calling or texting repeatedly, damaging property, following the person, sending gifts, or stealing items that belong to the victim. A victim can be stalked in a physical manner or by electronic means, including computers, cell phones, or on social media. Warning signs might include someone contacting you constantly, obtaining details before you provide them, unwanted presents or correspondences, monitoring you excessively, showing up unannounced, or damaging your property. Stalking is dangerous and should be reported immediately.
Intimate partner violence is any act of violence against a person who is in or has been involved in a sexual, dating, domestic, or other intimate relationship with the alleged offender. This includes physical violence, sexual violence, or a pattern of emotional or economic abuse. Examples of intimate partner violence include your partner slapping and pushing you during an argument, or a person that you share a child with hits you with an object. On the next slide, you will see an example of what sexual harassment could look like.
I get going, I got some work to get done. Yeah, I know, I'm bummed I'm here late too. Yep. Alright, well, give him 2 kisses for me, and, tuck him in. Yeah, love you too. Bye.
How's your night going?
Oh, hey, Lori. It's going alright. How about yours?
Better now. I like how you handled that situation earlier today.
Oh, thanks.
It was really manly of you.
Yeah, I guess so. I got a lot of work to do. I'm already here late enough.
Work can wait.
Look, I already missed my son's gymnastics class. I gotta get going. And I know what you're trying to do. I have a wife.
If you speak up, you're gonna get fired. And no one's gonna believe you. My balls are in your court.
I'm not doing this. We're not doing this one-on-one.
Consent is extremely important and an aspect of communication that must take place before and during any sexual activity. Consent is a clear, informed, and voluntary agreement between all participants knowingly engaged in sexual activity. Consent is active and ongoing throughout the sexual encounter between all participants. It must be mutually understandable by words and actions. Getting consent or agreement from potential sexual partners is the only way to know if someone actually wants to have sex. This typically happens during a conversation with all individuals involved. Consent is about establishing and setting boundaries as well as respecting a potential sexual partner. Individuals must agree to have sex every single time for it to be consensual. Consent is asking every time, mutual and respectful, and can be withdrawn at any time, freely and enthusiastically given. Consent is not silence or lack of response, implied or assumed, determined by previous or current sexual relationship status. Any phrase that does not mean continue means you need to check in. Everyone gets the final say over what happens with their body. It doesn't matter if there has been a previous hookup or even when in the middle of a sexual encounter and one partner changes their mind. Either partner is allowed to say stop or I don't feel comfortable or even I change my mind at any time, and this needs to be respected. Let's talk more about consent. Consent cannot be given by a person who is incapacitated from the voluntary or involuntary use of alcohol or drugs. Incapacitation is a level of impairment that causes an individual to be unable to make decisions. Signs of incapacitation include an inability to recognize what is occurring, lack of control over physical movements, lack of awareness of surroundings, and inability to communicate. Consent cannot be voluntarily given by someone who is incapacitated. If an individual reports an incident of sexual misconduct, in good faith, the reporting party will not get in trouble for using alcohol or drugs revealed while making the report. For example, if an individual who is under the age of 21 is at a party and were consuming alcohol, they will not get in trouble for underage consumption if they reported a sexual assault that they witnessed or experienced. This is known as amnesty and aims to remove barriers that prevent individuals from reporting sexual misconduct. More information about amnesty is found in the Title IX Sexual Misconduct Policy. Let's review with a quiz.
Let's review with 5 more questions. Number 1. While sexual harassment can be annoying, if the person doesn't intend to cause harm, then there is no issue. Number 2. These could be warning signs of stalking, showing up unannounced, monitoring a person excessively, constantly contacting someone, going out to dinner with friends. What would also have to be present for it to be considered stalking? Number 3. Domestic violence can only happen in marriages. Number 4. Sexual violence or assault could occur if the person is incapacitated. Number 5. There are 4 types of sexual misconduct. Let's see how we did. Let's review. Number 1. While sexual harassment can be annoying, if the person doesn't intend to cause harm, then there is no issue. False. Number 2. These could be warning signs of stalking, showing up unannounced, monitoring a person excessively, constantly contacting someone, or showing up with unwanted gifts. True. However, this behavior must cause the victim to fear for their safety or the safety of others, or suffer substantial emotional distress. Number 3. Domestic violence can only happen in marriages. False. Number 4. Sexual violence or assault could occur if the person is incapacitated. True. However, it can happen when someone is not incapacitated as well. Number 5. There are 4 types of sexual misconduct. False. There are 7 forms of sexual misconduct. All employees are encouraged to report discrimination or harassment that they learn of. Most employees, except those that are deemed confidential, are required to report all information related to potential sexual misconduct. This is because NIU faculty and staff are considered responsible employees unless they are acting in their capacity as a counselor or advocate with the university-identified confidential resource. It is important to note that even if a responsible employee has been told that a claimant or a victim already filed a report or made a report with the police, they are still required to file a report with the Title IX office. You are a responsible employee because you have the authority to take action to redress or remedy sexual misconduct. You have been given the duty of reporting sexual violence or any other misconduct to the Title IX coordinator. You represent a person a student could reasonably believe has this authority or duty. The duty of a responsible employee is to report what you see, hear, and or know, even if it doesn't seem important. Responsible employees cannot keep a report confidential. They must inform the victim survivor that they are not a confidential resource, but that confidential resources are available. Whether you are considered a responsible employee or not, NIU encourages everyone to report violations to aid in campus and community safety. Reports of discrimination, harassment, and sexual misconduct are made to the Ethics and Compliance Office. This office includes the Ethics Officer and Title IX Coordinator and satisfies your reporting obligation as a responsible employee. You may call the office, email them, or file a report online. Filing a report online is encouraged. Information to report should include: where did the incident take place? Who was involved? Were there any witnesses? What happened? Even if you don't have all the details, report what you know. All details are important. Don't try to categorize the incident, just report the behavior and actions. Northern Illinois University has trained investigators to conduct thorough investigations of complaints and walk all parties through the process. It is important to remember, the reporter should not investigate a complaint. The trained investigators will ask the necessary questions. This is a sensitive topic, and by reporting everything you know, the reporter could be giving the investigator crucial information to the case. NIU has certain responsibilities when it comes to sexual misconduct, which includes but are not limited to: receive complaints reports, advise individuals of resources and advocacy services, respond and investigate, provide interim measures options when needed, including but not limited to change in class schedule, modified living arrangement, dining or work environment, or transportation accommodations. Take steps to prevent the recurrence of the violation. Now let's talk about reporting.
Reporting policy violations is very important. If you have been impacted by discrimination, harassment, or sexual misconduct and wish to report the information yourself, you have options, no matter whether your time with Northern Illinois University is online, on campus, or a combination of both. You can file a report with the Northern Illinois University Ethics Officer and Title IX Coordinator using any of the contact information on the screen. Reports can also be made to the supervisor or with the police department of where the incident took place. All officers work closely with all involved to ensure they obtain the facts of the incident while maintaining privacy during their investigation. They are here to help all involved to determine an appropriate resolution to the case. If the situation is an emergency, be sure to call 911 immediately. You may also make a report to your supervisor. However, it is important to understand that your supervisor may be considered a responsible employee. Therefore, if you are making a report of sexual misconduct, they may be required to report that information to the Ethics Officer and Title IX Coordinator. Lastly, the university has an anonymous and confidential phone number that is received by the Ethics and Compliance Office. Please note that the university's ability to respond or take corrective measures may be impeded when a report is made anonymously or confidentially. However, the university will still attempt to provide resources and take steps to address the misconduct to the extent possible. Now that we have discussed what are internal options, let's talk about external options.
An individual can report discrimination, harassment, or sexual misconduct to state or federal agencies if they do not wish to file a complaint internally. An employee may contact the Illinois Department of Human Rights, IDHR, the Office of Executive Inspector General, OEIG, the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, EEOC, and the United States Department of Education Office for Civil Rights for any type of discrimination or harassment based on a protected category. The addresses of these entities is found within the non-discrimination policy. The IDHR process is public and requires details such as personal contact and employer information. OEIG is an independent executive branch that does not investigate on behalf of any individual or agency. OEIG investigations often involve interviews and review of relevant documents. Additionally, OEIG accepts anonymous reports, and these reports are confidential. Reports can be made in person or by mail to both the Illinois Department of Human Rights and OEIG. For more information on how to file a report with IDHR or OEIG, please refer to the legal definitions and processes handout in the toolbar to the left in this presentation. Let's talk more about the Illinois Department of Human Rights hotline.
An individual can report discrimination, harassment, or sexual misconduct to state or federal agencies if they do not wish to file a complaint internally. An employee may contact the Illinois Department of Human Rights, the Office of Executive Inspector General, the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, and the United States Department of Education Office for Civil Rights for any type of discrimination or harassment based on a protected category. The addresses of these entities is found within the non-discrimination policy. The IDHR process is public and requires details such as personal contact and employer information. OEIG is an independent executive branch that does not investigate on behalf of any individual or agency. OEIG investigations often involve interviews and review of relevant documents. Additionally, OEIG accepts anonymous reports, and these reports are confidential. Reports can be made in person or by mail to both the Illinois Department of Human Rights and OEIG. For more information on how to file a report with IDHR or OEIG, please review the legal definitions and processes handout in the toolbar to the left in this presentation. Let's talk more about the Illinois Department of Human Rights Hotline.
There are consequences to violating NIU policy or any laws. It is a violation of university policy and the Illinois Ethics Act to engage in sexual harassment. If an individual is found to have violated the university's policy prohibiting discrimination, harassment, retaliation, or sexual misconduct, they can face severe consequence up to and including termination. In addition to these consequences, the state may investigate reports of discrimination and harassment and make recommendations regarding continued employment. Under the Ethics Act sexual harassment prohibition, a fine of up to $5,000 per each violation may be given. Under state law, engaging in sexual harassment, unlawful discrimination, or retaliation can result in Illinois Human Rights Commission, state, or federal court proceedings. If these allegations against the person or entity are founded in the courts, the individual or entity may be entitled to damages, back pay, reinstatement, or other remedies. There are also consequences for filing a false report.
University policy prohibits individuals from making intentional false allegations, misrepresenting facts, failing or refusing to cooperate, or intentionally breaching confidentiality. If an employee is found to have engaged in this conduct, disciplinary action may result. In addition, state agencies may take action for similar types of conduct. The Executive Ethics Commission may levy a fine of up to $5,000 against any person who intentionally makes a false, frivolous, or bad faith allegation, or who intentionally obstructs or interferes in an OEIG investigation. Any person who intentionally makes a false report alleging sexual harassment to the OEIG, EEC, or to certain law enforcement agencies or officials is guilty of a misdemeanor. Also note that failure to cooperate with an OEIG investigation conducted pursuant to the Ethics Act, including intentional omissions and knowing false statements, is grounds for disciplinary action, including dismissal. Retaliation is also prohibited. Let's learn more on the next slide.
Retaliation is taking an adverse action against someone for participating in a protected activity. Employees need to know that retaliation against individuals who reasonably believe and in good faith report sexual harassment or discrimination, or who participate in investigations and other proceedings is against the law. Retaliation is taking an adverse action against someone for participating in a protected activity. An adverse action is something that would dissuade a reasonable person from engaging in a protected activity, including but not limited to making a report and participating in an investigation. Retaliation occurs when 1. An individual engages in a protected activity, 2. The individual suffers an adverse action, and 3. There is a link between the protected activity and the adverse action. Protected activities may include but are not limited to making a charge, filing a complaint, testifying, assisting, or participating in an investigation, proceeding, or hearing, participating in a Title IX complaint process, reporting discrimination, harassment, or bias. Adverse actions, acts of retaliation include but are not limited to threats, reprimands, intimidation or harassment, discharge, suspension, or demotion, denial of probation or transfer, or change in terms of conditions of employment of a state employee. Retaliation is prohibited by the Ethics Act. A state employee cannot take retaliatory action against another state employee who 1. Reports allegations of sexual harassment or discrimination, 2. Provides information or testifies in connection with an investigation, hearing, or other inquiry, or 3, participates in a proceeding to enforce the Ethics Act. If a retaliatory action occurs, the OEIG can investigate this matter and recommend discipline. An employee can also bring a lawsuit pursuant to the Ethics Act. Anyone who intentionally violates this prohibition on retaliation is guilty of a misdemeanor and is subject to discipline or discharge. Retaliation is prohibited under the Human Rights Act, as it is a civil rights violation to retaliate against someone who has opposed that which he or she reasonably and in good faith believes to be unlawful sexual harassment in employment. Retaliation is prohibited under the Illinois Whistleblower Act. An employer may not retaliate against an employee for disclosing information to a government or law enforcement agency where the employee has reasonable cause to believe that the information discloses a violation of a state or federal law, rule, or regulation. Employees are encouraged to report all acts of suspected retaliation. Reports of retaliation may be made online using the retaliation complaint form. Let's review a scenario.
What's happening? Your coworker Terry has been called on to answer questions about an allegation of sexual misconduct involving a coworker and their supervisor. Terry did not make the report, but was presented as a witness because the reporting party believes Terry saw what happened. Your supervisor has mentioned that supervisors are always getting blamed, and employees need to understand their supervisory style before they open their mouths. Leading up to the meeting, your boss has told you to transfer 2 big projects to Terry. Terry is now required to work until 7 p.m. many evenings to complete the work. You talked to your supervisor who said Terry has extra time and is exempt, so just relax. The week before Terry's meeting, the supervisor took everyone out to lunch to celebrate completion of the 2 big projects, but told Terry to stay back to cover the office. While Terry was at the meeting, the supervisor moved Terry's desk to the corner of the room. Other employees said this would make it difficult to collaborate with Terry. The supervisor said Terry talks too much instead of keeping focused on their work, so the move is necessary. This is an example of retaliation against Terry for being a witness to the investigation.
State employees and NIU Huskies are active bystanders. First, a bystander is a person who is present but not involved. The bystander effect is when there are a lot of people around a negative situation, but no one steps in to help. Huskies are not just bystanders. Huskies are active bystanders. An active bystander is someone who safely and without confrontation becomes involved or engaged. They actively take part in de-escalating the momentum of or stopping altogether a negative situation from happening. These situations could include discrimination, harassment, violence of any kind, sexual violence, domestic violence, dating violence, stalking, and any number of negative situations. Most of these situations start out small, then escalate. Active bystanders are those who take note of these situations and then take action in a safe and non-confrontational way. The next slide will describe ways you can become an active bystander and help prevent violence and discrimination on our campus. There are many ways to be an active bystander and safely intervene without confrontation. No matter your gender, age, sexual orientation, gender identity, ability, or race, we can all find a way to safely help someone who is in a negative situation. For example, as a delegator, we can get help by calling the supervisor or other coworker to help eliminate the negative situation. We could be a director and address the inappropriate behavior ourselves by asking the coworker to stop the inappropriate or negative behavior. Or we can be a distractor and divert the attention from the situation, maybe calling a short meeting, asking the offended coworker to help you with a project, or another way to distract the attention away from the negative situation. You can volunteer to be a part of the Active Bystander Program by contacting ADEI-training at niu.edu.
The United States Congress enacted the Campus Sexual Assault Victims Bill of Rights in 1992, which requires universities to ensure sexual assault victims have certain basic rights. The university also provides victim survivors with rights and options. These rights and options include, but are not limited to, being informed of all reporting options and having the ability to proceed with the matter in a way the victim survivor is most comfortable, to be notified of existing campus and community resources and services, the right to choose on or off-campus services, both, or none at all, and the right to be informed during every step of the investigation process. The Victim's Bill of Rights can be found in the Annual Clery Act, Safety and Security Report on the NIU website. Any employee has an opportunity to speak to a confidential resource if they have experienced sexual misconduct, discrimination, or harassment.
Confidential resources include the Employee Assistance Program, EAP, where staff provide information, services, and resources to employees and their families. EAP is a confidential resource and ensures a confidential environment for employees to gain support and assistance for their concerns about sexual misconduct, including sexual harassment. Services can address a wide range of needs, including anxiety and depression, workplace concerns, family and relationship difficulties, alcohol and drug concerns, grief, loss and bereavement, and life transition challenges. Throughout the year, a variety of programs related to employee overall health and well-being are offered and sponsored by the Employee Assistance Program. The Office of the Ombudsperson is also a confidential resource and provides students, faculty, and staff with guidance to help solve a variety of university-related issues or conflicts. They are confidential, neutral, informal, and independent. While they cannot provide legal advice or advocate on your behalf, they can advise you of your rights within the university. There are other campus resources you may be interested in.
No matter if you work or attend classes on an NIU campus, or your affiliation with Northern Illinois University is online as an instructor or student, there are many resources available if you are impacted by sexual misconduct. This page features some of the available campus resources that can be used by anyone affiliated with the university. Each resource can provide assistance over the phone if you are not located on the DeKalb main campus. Remember, sexual misconduct can occur via electronic means, through social media, or in person. It is important to know all the resources available regardless of your connection with the university. There are also off-campus resources. Here are off-campus resources available in the DeKalb area. If you are not located near the main campus, contact a local counseling agency, domestic violence or rape crisis center, or hospital in your area for information.
Let's review with 5 more questions. 1. Sexual harassment can be reported both on campus and to the state of Illinois. 2. When employees make a report in good faith, they can be fined $5,000. 3. Employees can speak to these 2 campus offices confidentially. 4. Employees can be active bystanders by reporting sexual misconduct. And 5. Responsible employees only include faculty. Let's see how we did. 1. Sexual harassment can be reported both on campus and to the state of Illinois. True. 2. When employees make a report in good faith, they can be fined $5,000. False. 3. Employees can speak to these 2 campus offices confidentially, EAP and the Ombudsperson. 4. Employees can be active bystanders by reporting sexual misconduct. True. And 5. Responsible employees only include faculty. False. Great, everyone. You are almost finished. Congratulations. You have almost completed the training. The last step is to take the test, which is located in the toolbar on the left side of this screen in Blackboard. You will have to score at least an 80% on the test to pass and be able to print your certificate. You must review the legal definitions and processes handout, which is available in the toolbar to the left and in the announcement you received in your email. Once you review the handout, you must certify on the final question in the test that yes, you have reviewed the handout. It is very important you are aware of the law and the definitions of the protected categories. Once you pass the test with an 80%, you will be able to print your certificate. Provide your supervisor with a copy of your certificate. Now it is time to go to the left toolbar, select the test option, and take the test. You can take the test as many times as you need to in order to pass. Go Huskies!